You were taught that money is something outside of you, something you need to chase, something that always feels just a little out of reach. From an early age, you learn to associate money with effort, pressure, and anxiety. You were told that if you worked harder, pushed longer, sacrificed more, money would eventually follow. And when it didn't, you quietly assumed something was wrong with you. But notice this. Even when you try your hardest, money often feels tense around you. It comes and goes unpredictably. It never seems to stay long enough for you to relax. And yet, you've seen people for whom money feels easy, not perfect, not dramatic, just easy. They don't appear smarter. They don't always work more. They don't seem constantly worried or obsessed. Money simply moves toward them. This is the part no one ever explained to you. Money is not just a number. It is not just paper, digits, or accounts. Money is energy. And like all energy, it does not respond to force. It responds to state. It responds to how you are inside. You don't attract money with effort. You attract it with alignment. Think about how energy works for the rest of your life. When you are tense, people feel it. When you are relaxed, others respond differently to you. Nothing about your words changes, only your state does. Money works the same way. It doesn't listen to what you say you want. It doesn't respond to how badly you need it. It responds to the emotional signal you're constantly sending. And whether you realize it or not, you're always sending one. When you move through life anxious about money, watching every number, fearing loss, measuring your worth through income, the tension becomes your signal. Not consciously, energetically. Money feels that contraction, and energy moves away from contraction. This is not punishment. This is not fate. This is not bad luck. It is simply how flow works. You've felt this before, even if you never named it. Moments when things came together without strain. Opportunities that appeared when you weren't desperately searching. Periods where money arrived when you were calm, focused, present. Those moments were not accidents. They were moments of alignment. You were not chasing. You were not grasping. You were open. And openness is magnetic. This audiobook is not here to teach you how to make more money. It is not here to give you steps, strategies, or formulas. It is here to help you remember something far more important. That your relationship with money is not built through effort alone. It is shaped by your inner state, by how safe you feel, by how much you trust life, by whether you are trying to control the flow or allowing it. You don't need to become someone else to experience this shift. You don't need to force positivity or suppress fear. You only need to begin noticing what is already happening within you. Because the moment you stop chasing money, something subtle changes. Your body relaxes, your mind quiets, your signal softens, and money responds, like water returning to open ground, like a current finding the path of least resistance. As you listen, let yourself slow down. Let these words move past logic and into feeling. You don't have to believe anything yet. Just notice. Because money has always been responding to you. And once you understand that, the way it moves in your life can begin to change naturally. Chapter 1. When money feels easy. You know the feeling, even if you've rarely talked about it. There are moments in your life when money feels light. Not abundant, not dramatic. Just easy. Bills don't feel heavy. Decisions don't feel urgent. You're not checking numbers every few minutes, calculating consequences, bracing for impact. Money is simply there, moving in the background of your life without demanding your constant attention. And then there are other moments. Moments when money feels tight even if the numbers haven't changed. Moments when every expense creates tension in your chest. When even thinking about money shortens your breath. Nothing on paper explains the difference, yet you feel it clearly. This chapter is about that difference. Because money does not only exist in bank accounts, it exists in your nervous system. It lives in how safe or unsafe you feel, in how much pressure you are carrying inside. When money feels easy, you are not fighting it. You are not gripping it with fear. You are not watching it constantly. You are not measuring your worth through it. You are relaxed in its presence, and relaxation changes everything. Think about how your body responds to tension. When you are stressed, your shoulders tighten, your breathing becomes shallow, your awareness narrows, energy contracts. Now think about moments when you feel calm and grounded. Your breath deepens, your movements slow, your attention widens, energy expands. Money responds to that same expansion. When you are contracted around money, it feels heavy. Not because money is heavy, but because you are holding it tightly. When you are expanded, money feels lighter because you are no longer resisting its movement. This is why some people seem to move through life with an ease you can't quite explain. They are not reckless. They are not careless. They are simply not tense. They don't treat money as something fragile that might disappear at any moment. They don't treat it as a judge watching their every move. They treat money like a current that passes through their life, and currents flow best when nothing blocks them. You may have experienced this yourself in small, quiet ways. Perhaps there was a time when you weren't focused on money at all. You were absorbed in your work, your creativity, or simply enjoying your life. And during that time, money arrived without struggle. Not because you demanded it, but because you weren't resisting it. When money feels easy, you're not in survival mode. You're not asking, what if this isn't enough? You're not scanning the future for danger. You are present. Presence is the doorway. Money does not move toward panic. It does not respond to desperation. Those states create noise, and energy avoids noise. Money moves toward clarity, toward openness, toward grounded attention. This is not a reward. It is not a moral judgment. It is simply how energy behaves. Notice something important here. When money feels easy, you're not trying to feel easy. You're not forcing calm. You are not repeating affirmations or pretending everything is fine. Ease happens when you stop pushing against reality, when you accept where you are without tightening against it, when you stop arguing with the present moment. That acceptance creates space, and space is where flow begins. Many people believe money feels easy after you have enough of it, but the truth runs in the opposite direction. Money often feels easier before there is more of it. Ease is not the result. Ease is the condition. This is why chasing money rarely works the way people expect. Chasing creates tension. Tension creates contraction. Contraction interrupts flow. When you chase, you send a signal that something is missing. That signal shapes how money behaves around you. When you allow, you send a different signal. One of trust. One of steadiness. That signal invites movement. You don't need to convince yourself of this intellectually. You can feel it. Think of how people respond to you when you are calm and confident. They lean in. They trust you. They open doors. Now think of how people respond when you're anxious or desperate. They hesitate. They pull back. They protect themselves. Money behaves in much the same way. When money feels easy, you're not afraid of losing it. Not because loss isn't possible, but because fear no longer controls you. You understand at a deeper level that money is a flow, not a possession. It comes, it goes, and it returns when there is space for it. Ease does not mean passivity. It does not mean indifference. It means non-resistance. You are still engaged with life. You still make decisions. You still act, but you act without gripping the outcome. This chapter is not asking you to change anything yet. It is only inviting you to notice. Notice how money feels in your body right now. Notice where you tighten. Notice where you hold your breath. There is no need to fix it. Awareness itself begins to soften resistance, and as resistance softens, ease becomes possible. When money feels easy, it is not because you finally figured something out. It is because you stopped fighting the flow. And that quiet shift is where everything begins to change. Chapter 2. The signal you're always sending. Whether you are aware of it or not, you are always communicating with money. Not through words, not through plans or intentions, but through your internal state. Every day, in small and ordinary moments, you send a signal. And that signal shapes how money responds to you. You don't wake up and consciously decide what signal to send. It emerges automatically from how safe you feel, how rushed you are, how much pressure you carry inside. From the emotional tone that follows you through your day. Money does not analyze your logic. It does not listen to explanations. It responds to feeling. Think about how you sense other people. Before they speak, you already know if someone is calm or tense, open or guarded, relaxed or controlling. They don't need to announce it. You feel it immediately. Money senses you in the same way. When your inner world is tight, hurried, or fearful, that tension becomes your signal. Not because you want it to, but because energy is honest. You can say you trust money. You can say you believe things will work out. But if your body is braced, if your thoughts are racing, if your attention is locked on to lack, the signal is already clear. Money responds to what is real, not to what is declared. This is why so many people feel confused around money. They are doing the right things. They are thinking positively. They are working hard, and yet money still feels distant. The signal beneath the effort is one of urgency, of needing, of fear of not having enough. Urgency compresses energy. When energy compresses, flow slows. This is not a failure on your part. It is not something to feel ashamed of. Most people were trained into this signal early in life. You learned, often without words, that money was scarce, that it was something to worry about, that safety depended on controlling it. Those lessons didn't live in your mind. They settled into your nervous system. So now, even when you want to feel calm about money, your body may still react as if something is at risk. That reaction is the signal. Notice how subtle this is. The signal is not just panic or stress. It can show up as constant monitoring, as checking balances too often, as mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios. It can even show up as overplanning. On the surface, planning looks responsible, but beneath it, there is often fear of uncertainty. Money feels that fear, and it responds by staying unpredictable. Now notice the opposite signal. Think about moments when you felt grounded and steady, when you trusted yourself to handle whatever came next, when you were focused on what you were doing rather than on what might go wrong. In those moments, your signal was calm, not careless, calm. Money moves differently around calm energy. It lingers, it circulates, it finds pathways. This does not mean money immediately floods in. That expectation itself would create tension. It means the relationship changes. Money no longer feels like an external threat. It becomes part of a larger flow you are participating in. The most important thing to understand here is this. You are not sending one signal about money. You're sending it constantly. Through your thoughts, through your posture, through the way you breathe when you think about expenses or income, even through how you talk about money with others. Complaining, worrying, joking about being broke, downplaying desire. All of these carry emotional weight. All of them shape the signal. And again, this is not about controlling yourself. Trying to force a better signal only adds another layer of tension. The shift begins with awareness. When you notice the signal without judging it, something starts to soften. You might notice how your chest tightens when a bill arrives, or how your jaw clenches when you think about the future, or how your mind speeds up when you check your balance. Just noticing, no fixing, no correcting. Awareness brings space, and space changes the signal naturally. As you become more present with your internal state, you begin to feel the difference between urgency and clarity, between need and openness. You start to recognize that money responds best when you're not trying to get something from it. It responds when you are stable within yourself. This is why alignment matters more than effort. Effort can be driven by fear or by clarity. Money feels the difference immediately. Fear-driven effort carries a sharp edge. Clarity-driven action feels grounded and clean. One repels, the other invites. When you understand that you are always sending a signal, you stop trying to manipulate outcomes. You begin paying attention to your inner environment instead. Not to perfect it, but to understand it. And as understanding grows, the signal changes. Quietly, naturally. Money has always been responding to you. It has never stopped. The only question is, what have you been broadcasting? As you continue listening, you'll begin to feel that answer more clearly. Chapter 3. Effort and Resistance. You are taught to believe that effort is always good, that more effort leads to better results, that if something isn't working, the answer must be to push harder. And in many areas of life, effort does matter. Learning a skill, showing up consistently, doing what needs to be done. But when it comes to money, effort carries a hidden side that few people ever talk about. Effort is not neutral. Effort always comes from a state. You can put in effort from clarity, or you can put in effort from fear, and money feels the difference immediately. When effort comes from fear, it creates resistance. You may recognize this resistance without having words for it. It feels like strain, like swimming upstream, like doing everything right and still feeling blocked. You are working. You are trying. You are thinking about money constantly. And yet, something feels tight. This tightness is not a lack of discipline. It is not a lack of intelligence. It is resistance. Resistance is what happens when your energy is pushing against reality instead of moving with it. Think about your body for a moment. When you lift something light, your muscles engage naturally. There is movement without strain. But when you grip something too tightly, your muscles tire quickly. The effort becomes exhausting. The flow disappears. Money works the same way. Effort that is relaxed supports flow. Effort that is tense interrupts it. Most people are not aware of how tense their effort around money has become. It feels normal because it has been practiced for years. Worry disguised as responsibility. Pressure disguised as motivation. Control disguised as planning. But beneath all of it is fear. Fear of not having enough. Fear of falling behind. Fear of losing control. That fear hardens effort into resistance, and resistance pushes money away. This is why working harder often makes money feel further away, not closer. The more you push, the more you tighten. The more you tighten, the more energy contracts. The more energy contracts, the harder it becomes for anything to flow toward you. This is not because money is punishing you, it is because flow requires openness. Imagine trying to breathe while clenching your chest. No matter how badly you want air, your body cannot receive it fully. Money behaves in a similar way. When your inner state is clenched, effort becomes force. Force always meets resistance. You may have noticed this pattern before. Times when you worked intensely out of fear and nothing seemed to move. Projects that drained you but produced little. Decisions made in urgency that created more stress instead of relief. And then other times when you acted without pressure, when you trust yourself, when effort felt focused rather than desperate. Those actions had a different quality. They were clean, they were grounded, they didn't exhaust you. Money responds to that quality. This is why some people appear to do less and receive more. They are not avoiding effort. They are avoiding resistance. They move when something feels aligned. They pause when something feels forced. Their effort flows instead of colliding. For you, resistance often shows up quietly. It may look like constantly checking progress, replaying decisions in your mind, pushing yourself even when your body is signaling fatigue. It may look like impatience with timing, a need for results now, a discomfort with uncertainty. All of these are forms of resistance. They're signs that effort has slipped into control. Control tightens energy. Money avoids tight spaces. This does not mean you should stop acting. It does not mean you should wait passively. It means you begin to notice how you are acting. Is your effort coming from trust or from fear, from clarity or from urgency? The answer matters more than the action itself. Effort rooted in fear carries a heavy emotional charge. It feels sharp, pressurized, restless. Effort rooted in alignment feels different. It is steady, intentional, quiet. It doesn't demand immediate validation. When effort is aligned, you are not trying to escape the present moment. You are working with it. Resistance dissolves when you stop arguing with where you are. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of money energy. People believe resistance disappears after success arrives, but resistance must soften before flow can return. You don't relax because money comes. Money comes when you relax, not in your behavior, in your inner state. Relaxation does not mean laziness. It means releasing the internal fight. You stop treating money as something that must be conquered. You stop proving your worth through strain. You allow effort to become a natural expression of clarity, not a reaction to fear. This shift is subtle but powerful. You may notice it when you stop pushing yourself past exhaustion, when you choose rest without guilt, when you allow things to unfold without constant interference. As resistance softens, effort becomes efficient. Less energy is wasted. More movement becomes possible. Money does not resist effort. It resists pressure. Pressure tells money that the space is unsafe, that it will be controlled, that it will be clung to. Flow requires trust, and trust cannot exist where resistance dominates. This chapter is not asking you to eliminate effort. It is inviting you to notice resistance. Notice where you are pushing unnecessarily. Notice where effort feels heavy instead of alive. There is wisdom in that heaviness. It is not telling you to quit. It is telling you to soften. When effort becomes gentle, energy opens. When energy opens, money can move. You don't need to force that movement. You only need to stop blocking it. And that realization alone begins to change everything. Chapter 4. How Money Senses Openness. You may not think of money as something that can sense you. You may see it as numbers, systems, transactions, cold, neutral, mechanical. But money behaves nothing like a machine. Money behaves like energy, and energy is sensitive. It responds to openness the way a river responds to an open channel. It moves toward space. It avoids obstruction. You have felt this principle everywhere else in life. When someone is open with you, you feel invited. You speak more freely. You share more honestly. When someone is closed, guarded, or tense, you instinctively pull back. You choose your words carefully. You limit how much of yourself you offer. Money responds to you in the same way, not because money has emotions, but because energy follows conditions. Openness is a condition. When you are open, energy circulates. When you are closed, energy stalls. This is not about optimism. It is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about how much internal space you allow. Openness begins inside your body. Notice what happens when you think about money. Do you tighten your jaw? Do you brace your shoulders? Do you hold your breath? These are signs of closure. They are not wrong. They are learned responses. At some point, your system learned that money meant danger, uncertainty, or pressure. So your body learned to protect itself. Protection creates closure. Closure narrows the field. Money does not move well in narrow spaces. Openness, on the other hand, feels like room. It feels like breathing fully, like standing upright instead of hunching forward, like letting your attention soften instead of locking onto a single outcome. When you are open, you are not trying to control money. You are allowing it to move. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop gripping. There is a difference. Caring is expensive. Gripping is constrictive. Money senses that difference immediately. When you grip money, even mentally, you communicate scarcity. You communicate fear of loss. You communicate urgency. Those signals tell money that the space is unsafe. Energy avoids unsafe spaces, not out of judgment, out of natural response. When you are open, you are not signaling that you have everything figured out. You're signaling that you trust yourself to respond to what comes. That trust creates safety. Safety invites flow. Think about moments in your life when things seem to line up without force. You weren't micromanaging. You weren't watching the clock. You weren't obsessing over outcomes. You were engaged but relaxed. That state was openness. Money tends to find those moments, not because you were asking for it, but because you weren't blocking it. Openness does not come from convincing your mind. It comes from releasing tension in your body and expectations in your thoughts. You don't open by demanding results. You open by allowing uncertainty. This is uncomfortable for many people. Uncertainty feels unsafe when you've been trained to equate safety with control. But control tightens, and tightness blocks flow. Openness says, I don't know exactly how this will unfold, and I'm okay with that. That sentence alone carries enormous energetic weight. It tells money you are not desperate. It tells money you are not clinging. It tells money there is room to move. You may notice resistance to this idea. A part of you may say, if I relax, everything will fall apart. That belief is common and understandable. But look closely. Has tension truly protected you? Has constant vigilance brought ease, or has it simply kept you exhausted? Openness is not irresponsibility, it is responsive. When you are open, you are more aware, not less. You see opportunities instead of fixating on threats. You sense timing instead of forcing action. Money responds to awareness. Awareness is spacious. Closed attention is narrow. Open attention is wide. Money moves more easily in wide fields. This is why money often appears when you are focused on something meaningful rather than on money itself. Your attention opens outward. Your identity loosens. You stop defining yourself by numbers, and in that openness, energy shifts. Money senses when it is being treated as a tool rather than as a source of identity or safety. Tools are used freely. Identities are defended anxiously. When money becomes part of who you are, you close it. When money becomes something you work with, you open. Openness also means allowing money to come and go. Clinging to money creates stagnation. Allowing movement creates circulation. Circulation keeps energy alive. This does not mean reckless spending. It means releasing emotional attachment. You can be thoughtful without being tense. You can plan without gripping. That balance is openness. Notice how different this feels from trying to attract money. Attraction implies effort. It implies doing something to get something. Openness requires no effort. It is a state of allowing. Money senses that you are not trying to trap it, that you are not demanding proof, that you are not measuring your worth by its presence. And in that freedom, money is free to move. This chapter is not asking you to open all at once. Openness is not a switch. It is a gradual softening. You may start by noticing small moments of closure, moments when you tense without realizing it, moments when fear sneaks into your thoughts. Awareness alone begins to open space. You do not need to fix yourself. You do not need to become fearless. You only need to stop tightening against life. Money senses that. It senses when you are relaxed enough to receive, when you are steady enough to allow flow, when you trust yourself enough to let energy move through you. Openness is not something you do, it is something you allow. And as you allow it, quietly, gently, money begins to respond in its own time, in its own way. Because energy always moves towards space. Chapter 5. Remembering when you didn't chase. There was a time in your life when money was not the center of your attention. You may not remember it clearly at first. It might feel distant, almost irrelevant now. But it exists, a period when you weren't watching numbers, when you weren't calculating every move. When money was present, it wasn't heavy. You weren't trying to figure it out. You weren't chasing outcomes. You were simply living inside what you were doing. And during that time, money moved. Maybe it arrived through unexpected opportunities. Maybe support showed up without being asked. Maybe things simply worked out more smoothly than usual. Nothing about you was more intelligent then. Nothing about the world was more generous. What changed was your relationship with the moment. You were not chasing. Chasing is not just action. It is a state of mind. It is the feeling that something is ahead of you and you must reach it before it disappears. It is the belief that if you stop moving, you will fall behind. It is the quiet fear that what you have is never enough. When you chase money, your attention leaves the present moment. It jumps into the future, scanning for safety, for certainty, for proof. And the present becomes tense. Money does not move well in tense spaces. Think back to a moment when you were deeply absorbed in something. You might have been learning, creating, helping, building, or simply enjoying life. Time passed quickly. Your body felt relaxed. Your mind felt clear. You were not thinking about money, not because you were avoiding it, but because you didn't need to. That state was not accidental. It was a state of alignment. In that alignment, you are not trying to extract value from life. You are participating in it. Money tends to follow participation, not pursuit. When you chase, you stand outside the flow, trying to grab something from it. When you participate, you are inside the flow, moving with it. This is why chasing often feels exhausting. You are always one step behind what you want. Always reaching, always adjusting. Chasing creates urgency. Urgency tightens your nervous system. Tightness narrows perception. You stop seeing possibilities. You only see pressure. When you remember times you didn't chase, you remember a different quality of attention. Your attention was wide, curious, engaged. You trusted that what you were doing mattered, even without immediate reward. That trust created steadiness. Steadiness is magnetic. Money does not need to be convinced to move. It needs space. Chasing removes space. It tells money, I need you to validate me. It tells money, I'm not safe without you. That message creates imbalance. Money resists being turned into a source of identity or safety. It prefers to remain a tool, a current, a means of exchange. When you didn't chase, money stayed in its proper place. It was not the judge of your worth. It was not the measure of your future. It was simply part of the environment. That neutrality allowed flow. You may notice resistance as you reflect on this. A part of you may say, I can't afford not to chase. If I relax, nothing will happen. This belief is understandable. It comes from years of conditioning. But notice something carefully. Did chasing actually bring you peace? Did it make money feel stable, or did it keep you in constant motion, constantly alert? Chasing creates activity, but not always progress. When you remember moments you didn't chase, you may also remember feeling more connected to yourself. You trusted your timing. You trusted your judgment. You trusted that opportunities could emerge naturally. That trust reduces noise inside you. Noise blocks intuition. Silence sharpens it. Money often arrives through intuition, through noticing the right moment, through sensing when to move and when to wait. Chasing drowns out that signal. When you stop chasing, you don't stop acting. You stop forcing. Action becomes responsive instead of reactive. You move because something feels right, not because you are afraid of missing out. This difference matters. Fear-based movement scatters energy. Aligned movement concentrates it. Money responds to concentration. Think of chasing like running after a moving target. Your eyes are locked forward. Your body is tense. You're not aware of your surroundings. Now think of standing still, alert, open, present. You see more. You hear more. You notice subtle shifts. From that place, movement becomes precise. That precision creates results with less effort. When you didn't chase, you were more precise. You didn't waste energy proving yourself. You didn't exhaust yourself trying to control outcomes. You allowed life to meet you halfway. This chapter is not suggesting that you abandon goals or responsibilities. It is inviting you to remember a state you already know. The state where money was not the enemy, where it wasn't the obsession, where it didn't define your sense of safety. Remembering that state is powerful, not because it guarantees anything, but because it reconnects you to how flow actually feels. You don't need to recreate the past. You don't need to force yourself back into that state. You only need to recognize it. Recognition softens effort. Softening restores space. Space allows movement. As you remember when you don't chase, something subtle happens. Your body relaxes. Your breath deepens. Your attention returns to the present. And in that return, the signal you send begins to change. Money feels that change, not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. Because money has always responded best when you are no longer running after it, but standing calmly in your own life, open to what could arrive. Chapter 6. The Paradox of Needing. You have been taught to believe that needing money is a natural, even necessary, state. That if you don't feel the pressure of need, you won't act. That urgency is the engine of wealth. And yet, in your experience, you've noticed something strange. The more you need, the less easily money seems to come. The more desperate you feel, the more resistance builds. This is the paradox. Need creates contraction. Contraction restricts flow. And flow is the channel through which money moves. Consider your body for a moment. When you are physically tense, the energy in your muscles is locked. Blood does not circulate freely. Movement becomes clumsy. Effort takes more energy than it produces. Need operates in the same way. It tightens your nervous system. It narrows your perception. It makes every opportunity feel urgent and limited. And yet, you cannot help but feel it. It has been conditioned into you for years. Need is a signal that something is missing, and that signal runs deep. But here's the subtle truth you rarely hear. Money does not respond to need. It responds to openness. When you are needy, you send a signal of lack. That signal tells money that the space is unsafe, that it must be guarded, controlled, captured. Energy recoils. When you release need, even slightly, something changes. Your body relaxes. Your perception expands. Your attention softens. And suddenly, opportunities that were invisible become apparent. Paths that seemed blocked become clear. Money begins to move. Not because you are trying harder, but because you are no longer resisting. Think of this like water flowing through a pipe. Tighten the pipe with your hands and the flow slows. Release it even a little and the water moves faster. The liquid does not care about effort. It only responds to space. This is why moments when you are calm and present often bring unexpected financial ease. You were not desperate then. You were alert, you were open, and money responded naturally. You may resist this idea, even silently. You might think, if I don't need it, I won't act. I will be passive. I will lose everything. This is the fear of speaking, and fear is exactly what tightens the channel. Action from fear contracts energy. Action from clarity expands it. Notice the difference. When you act from fear, every movement carries pressure. Every decision is wrapped in tension. Even success feels fragile. Even gain feels temporary. When you act from clarity, movement is precise. Energy is directed efficiently. Results often arrive without struggle, and they tend to last longer because they emerge from alignment, not pressure. Need can feel like motivation. It can feel like fuel. But it is actually contraction, masquerading as energy. The more you push from need, the more you repel the very thing you seek. This is the paradox in practice. Some of the people you admire may seem to act with urgency. They seem driven. They seem desperate. But observe closely. Much of their success is built on a hidden base of openness. They act intentionally, from a calm center, even if outwardly it looks like hustle. Their urgency is strategic, not reactive. Their need is measured, not contracted. Contrast that with your own patterns. Times when you've acted urgently from fear. Times when your need was raw and unfiltered. You may have noticed the results were inconsistent. Opportunity slipped away, energy drained without return. It is not because you are doing something wrong. It is because you need to contract the channel. Money, energy, and opportunity do not flow where contraction dominates. The key is subtle, almost invisible. Awareness of your inner state is the doorway. When you notice a need arising, you do not need to suppress it. You do not need to chase it away aggressively. You simply observe. Observation begins to soften contraction. Softening creates space. Space allows flow. You may begin with small experiments. Notice when your attention tightens around money. Notice when your thoughts spiral into, "I must have this." Notice the physical tension that accompanies it. Do not judge. Do not try to fix. Just observe. Even this awareness begins to shift the signal. As the signal softens, your presence becomes magnetic. Money is drawn toward alignment, not toward desperation. It seeks calm, not pressure. It finds flow, not force. You may find that releasing need does not reduce your action. In fact, action often becomes more precise. You act only where it feels natural. You do not waste energy forcing outcomes. The difference is subtle but profound. Money moves through expanded energy fields. It avoids constricted ones. Your task is not to manufacture flow through effort. It is to cultivate presence, openness, and trust. This is not about passive waiting. It is about inner state. It is about allowing the current to move around and through you. When you practice this, even slightly, life begins to respond differently. Opportunities that seemed unavailable appear. Connections form naturally. Resources align with your intentions without strain. The paradox remains clear. Need contracts. Release contracts. Flow begins. This is the principle the wealthy understand intuitively. They do not constantly chase money from a place of lack. They move from alignment. They create conditions that are inviting. They trust that energy will meet them halfway. For you, the challenge is practical and psychological. Your entire life has trained you to believe that needing is normal. That pressure is the engine of action. That lack is the motivator. Breaking this conditioning takes attention, it takes practice, it takes patience. Start by noticing in quiet moments where need arises. Notice how it tightens your body. Notice how it narrows your thoughts. Then allow space. Allow your attention to expand. Allow your breath to deepen. You do not need to chase more. You do not need to fix anything yet. You only need to allow it. Flow will respond. Money responds to openness. Opportunity responds to presence. Energy responds to trust. Need is the doorway, but only when it softens. And as you begin to soften, the paradox becomes real. The less you cling, the more you receive. The less you push, the more moves toward you. The less you need, the easier it becomes. This understanding is not theoretical. It is experiential. It is something you can feel before you can articulate, and that feeling is more reliable than any strategy, formula, or plan. When you act from softening rather than pressure, your energy aligns, your actions become intentional, your perception becomes expansive. Money moves naturally in response. This is the lesson that few are taught. That effort alone does not create flow. That urgency is often the opposite of attraction. That needs contracts that you desire most. And when you remember this, even quietly, the current begins to shift in your life. You become the point of magnetic presence. Money flows toward your openness. And paradoxically, because you no longer need it desperately, you find it more abundant than ever. Chapter 7. The quiet shift inside you. There is a moment that rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with fireworks. It does not feel dramatic or victorious. It often happens so quietly that you almost miss it. And yet, this moment changes everything. It is the moment when something inside you stops pushing. Not because you gave up, not because you failed, but because a deeper understanding settled in. You stopped trying to force life to respond. You stopped demanding proof from money. You stopped bracing yourself for what might go wrong. And in that pause, something softened. This is the quiet shift. It does not come from willpower. It does not come from effort. It comes from awareness. You begin to notice how often you have been holding your breath, how often your body has been preparing for impact, how often your mind has been rehearsing futures that never arrived. You notice this not with judgment, but with clarity. And clarity relaxes the system. The quiet shift inside you is not a new belief. It is not a positive thought you repeat. It is a change in posture toward life. You stop leaning forward anxiously. You stop pulling backward defensively. You begin to stand where you are. This standing is subtle, but powerful. It tells your nervous system that you are safe enough to be present. It tells your mind that it does not need to run ahead constantly. It tells your body that it can release unnecessary tension. Energy responds immediately. When you are constantly pushing, your energy is scattered. It leaks into worry, overthinking, and self-protection. It is busy, but not effective. When the quiet shift happens, your energy gathers. It becomes centered, available, responsive. This is when money begins to feel different around you. Not because anything external has changed, but because you have. Money senses when you are no longer trying to control it. It senses when you are no longer defining yourself by it. It senses when you are steady enough to let it move. The quiet shift often begins with exhaustion. You may reach a point where forcing no longer feels possible, where chasing feels empty, where effort without alignment drains you more than it helps. This exhaustion is not failure. It is information. It tells you that the old way no longer fits. When you listen to that message, rather than fighting it, the shift begins. You stop asking, "How do I get more?" and begin asking, "How can I be more present?" Presence changes everything. When you are present, you notice subtle opportunities. You sense timing. You feel when to move and when to wait. These signals were always there. You just couldn't hear them over the noise of urgency. The quiet shift also changes how you relate to yourself. You stop measuring your worth by outcomes. You stop turning every decision into a test of survival. You begin to trust your ability to respond to life as it unfolds. Trust expands energy. Expansion invites flow. Money does not need you to be confident in the future. It needs you to be grounded in the present. Grounded presence is magnetic. It is calm without being passive, alert without being tense, engaged without being attached. This quality cannot be faked. It emerges naturally when resistance dissolves. You may notice that after the quiet shift, your actions feel different. You still act, you still decide, you still create, but your actions are no longer frantic. They are deliberate. They feel clean. They do not carry the emotional charge of fear. Money responds to clean action. It moves toward clarity. It avoids chaos. The quiet shift also changes how you interpret setbacks. Instead of seeing them as threats, you see them as feedback. Instead of panicking, you pause. Instead of reacting, you adjust. This adaptability keeps energy moving. Rigid systems break under pressure. Flexible systems flow around obstacles. You become more flexible after the shift, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped clinging. Clinging narrows perception. Letting go widens it. In widened perception, you see more options, more pathways, more timing windows. Money often arrives through pathways you could not have planned, but you can only recognize them when you are not locked into one outcome. The quiet shift loosens that lock. You may notice people responding differently to you as well. Your conversations change. Your presence feels calmer. Your words carry less urgency. Others feel safer around you. And where people feel safe, resources move. Opportunities flow through trust. Trust grows in calm environments. Money follows trust. Not because trust guarantees success, but because it allows movement. The quiet shift inside you is not permanent. You may slip back into old patterns. You may feel an urgency to return. This is normal. The shift is not a destination. It is a reference point. Once you experience it, you know what alignment feels like. You know the difference between force and flow. You know when you are pushing and when you are present. That knowledge is enough. You don't need to hold the shift perfectly. You only need to return to it when you notice tension rising. Each return becomes easier. Your system learns that it does not need to live in constant defense. That safety can exist without control. That flow can happen without struggle. Money senses this learning. It responds to consistency of state, not intensity of effort. Over time, the quiet shift reshapes your relationship with money completely. Money becomes less emotional, less charged, less personal. It becomes what it always was, a current moving through your life. You no longer try to own the current, you learn to stand in it. Standing in the current does not mean being swept away. It means feeling the direction of flow. It means adjusting your stance rather than fighting the water. This is mastery. Not mastery over money, mastery over your internal state. The quiet shift inside you is the beginning of that mastery. It does not demand attention. It does not announce itself. But once it happens, even briefly, you feel the difference. Your body feels lighter. Your mind feels clearer. Your relationship with money feels less tense. And from that place, without effort, without force, life begins to respond in new ways. Because energy always responds to alignment, and alignment begins quietly, inside you. Chapter 8. You were never meant to chase. At some point, often without realizing it, you were taught to run toward security, to run toward certainty, to run toward money as if it were always just ahead of you, moving faster the closer you got. And so you learned to chase. You learned to measure your progress by how far you were from where you wanted to be. You learned to stay alert, tense, prepared to accelerate at any moment. You learned that slowing down meant falling behind. But this was never your natural state. You were never meant to chase money. Chasing assumes separation. It assumes money exists somewhere else, detached from you, withholding itself until you prove your worth. It assumes that effort alone determines access. That assumption shapes everything. When you chase, your attention leaves your body. It jumps forward into imagined futures. Your nervous system stays on high alert, scanning for threats and opportunities at the same time. This constant forward pull fragments your energy. Fragmented energy cannot attract, it can only be pursued. You may have felt this fragmentation as restlessness, as difficulty being present, as the sense that even when you achieve something, relief is brief. Because the chase never truly ends. There is always another target, another milestone, another number that promises safety but never quite delivers it. This is the trap of chasing. It keeps you moving but rarely grounded, busy but rarely fulfilled, motivated but rarely at ease. You are not designed for this. Your natural state is not pursuit. It is presence. Presence gathers energy. It brings you back into your body, into the moment, into direct contact with life as it is. From presence, action becomes intelligent. You act not because you are afraid of missing out, but because something feels right to move toward. You choose not from urgency, but from clarity. Money responds to clarity. When you stop chasing, you stop sending the signal of lack. You stop broadcasting that something essential is missing. You stop telling money that you are incomplete without it. Instead, you send a different signal, a signal of stability, of self-trust, of grounded engagement with life. This signal changes the entire relationship. Money no longer feels like an external prize. It becomes a response to value created, to presence offered, to participate rather than pursue. This does not mean you become passive. It means your movement changes quality. You may still work, you may still build, you may still aim for growth, but you no longer run after outcomes. You let outcomes emerge. Letting outcomes emerge does not mean surrendering responsibility. It means releasing the illusion that force creates flow. Flow responds to openness, to steadiness, to the absence of internal struggle. When you stop chasing, your actions align naturally with your values. You stop doing things solely for money. You begin doing things because they matter to you. Paradoxically, this often brings more money into your life. Not because money rewards virtue, but because alignment creates coherence. Coherent energy moves efficiently. It attracts cooperation. It invites opportunities. You may notice that after releasing the chase, your timing improves. You sense when to wait. You sense when to move. This sensitivity was always there. It was simply drowned out by noise. Chasing is noisy. It fills your mind with calculations, comparisons, and pressure. It makes every decision feel urgent. It turns life into a series of races. When you stop chasing, silence returns. In that silence, intuition becomes audible. You begin to trust subtle cues. You notice when something feels expansive or contractive. These sensations guide you more reliably than fear ever could. Money respects this guidance. It moves toward environments where decisions are made from awareness rather than panic, where resources are used thoughtfully rather than desperately. When you chase, you treat money like prey, something to be caught before it escapes. When you stop chasing, you treat money like a current, something to step into and move with. Currents cannot be caught. They can only be entered. Entering the current requires trust. Trust not in outcomes, but in yourself, in your ability to respond, in your capacity to adjust. This trust removes the need for constant vigilance. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to justify your existence through accumulation. You no longer need money to tell you who you are. This is the deepest shift. When money stops being a measure of your worth, it loses its emotional charge. It becomes neutral, functional, free to move. Emotionally charged money sticks. It creates anxiety, hoarding, fear of loss. Neutral money circulates. It enters, it exits, it returns. Circulation keeps energy alive. This chapter is not asking you to reject ambition. It is asking you to release desperation. Ambition with presence is powerful. Ambition with fear is exhausting. You were never meant to live exhausted. Your system was designed for rhythm, for cycles of effort and rest, for engagement without constant strain. Chasing breaks rhythm. It demands constant acceleration. When you step out of the chase, rhythm returns. You work when it is time to work. You rest when it is time to rest. You move when it feels aligned. This rhythm supports sustainability. Sustainability attracts resources. Money prefers environments where it can stay, where it can circulate without being clung to, where it is not burdened with emotional weight. By not chasing, you create such an environment. This does not happen overnight. Chasing is a habit, often reinforced by culture, family, and fear. Releasing it is a gradual process. You may notice moments when you fall back into pursuit, moments when urgency returns. When this happens, you do not need to correct yourself harshly. You simply notice. Notice the tightening. Notice the forward pull. Notice the urge to run. Then gently return to where you are. Feel your body. Feel your breath. Feel the ground beneath you. Presence restores alignment. Alignment restores flow. You were never meant to chase money across your life like a moving target. You were meant to stand in your own life, fully present, fully engaged. From that place, money knows how to find you. Not because you demand it, not because you prove yourself, but because you have become a stable point in the flow. And energy always moves towards stability. When you stop chasing, you don't fall behind. You finally arrive. Here, trusting the flow. As you reach the end of this journey, nothing needs to be forced into understanding. There is no final lesson to memorize, no rule to apply perfectly, no outcome you must demand from yourself. What matters has already settled quietly inside you. You have felt it throughout these chapters, in the spaces between the words, in the moments where something softened rather than tightened. You have seen that money was never the real struggle. The struggle was tense. The struggle was resistance. The struggle was the belief that you had to chase life in order to be safe within it. And now, something different is possible. You understand that money responds to state, not force. That flow returns when pressure releases. That ease is not a reward, but a condition. You are never broken. You are never incapable. You are simply taught to relate to money from fear rather than trust. And fear narrows everything it touches. As you move forward, you do not need to stay aligned perfectly. Alignment is not a performance. It is a direction you can return to again and again. Whenever you notice yourself tightening, whenever urgency pulls you forward, whenever fear tells you that you are behind, that is your cue. Not to push harder, but to pause, to return to presence, to feel your body, to allow your breath to slow. In that slowing, energy reorganizes itself. Money does not need you to be fearless. It needs you to be grounded. It needs you to be open enough to receive and steady enough to let go. This balance is subtle, but powerful. You may notice that life begins to feel less hostile, that decisions feel cleaner, that opportunities appear without being hunted. Not because you're doing something extraordinary, but because you are no longer resisting the natural movement of energy. You will still work. You will still create. You will still act. But your actions will come from clarity rather than panic, from trust rather than desperation. And that difference changes everything. Money is not a test of your worth. It is not a judge of your future. It is not something you must capture or control. It is a current, and you are learning how to stand in it. There will be moments when the old patterns return, when chasing feels tempting, when fear feels loud. When that happens, remember this. You do not need to fix yourself. You do not need to rush back to alignment. You only need to notice. Noticing brings space. Space brings openness. Openness restores flow. This is not a technique. It is a relationship that deepens with patience, with gentleness, with trust in your own ability to respond to life as it unfolds. Money will continue to move in and out of your experience. That is natural. What changes now is how you meet it. With less tension, with more presence, with the quiet confidence that you are not chasing anymore. You are standing where you are, aware, open, alive. And from that place, energy knows exactly how to move. This is not the end of something. It is a return to flow, a return to ease, a return to yourself.